In this video, I'm going to break down the hearing about the Twitter files between journalist Matt Taibbi, who broke the story, and some of the most soulless and disingenuous politicians you are ever likely to see. And for those of you who aren't fully up to date with it, the Twitter files basically revealed an elaborate bureaucracy of censorship. It revealed that the FBI paid Twitter millions of dollars to censor people. They also created an influence campaign suppressing the truth and amplifying lies such as the Hunter Biden laptop, COVID, and Russian collusion. It also revealed that Twitter created an information campaign to shape the COVID narrative and suppress the truth. And it also revealed on many occasions the US government asking Twitter for user IDs, IP addresses of users, and even geolocation. And this is on thousands and thousands of occasions, and it's not necessarily known what Twitter's response was, but I'll leave it to your imagination to come to your own conclusion. And this is the sort of information that the government would normally need a subpoena for, but not in this case. So basically, a lot of the things that people were slandered for years and called conspiracy theorists have come to light as being true. And it goes without saying that there are some pretty powerful people who are pretty pissed off about this. And it's no surprise because there's a word for when governments and big corporations work together in lockstep to try and create a monopoly over information and how it's disseminated, and try and monitor citizens in order to further the agenda of the party. I'll give you a hint. It's a word starting with F, and it's a word that leftists will use with reckless abandon to describe anyone who is mildly conservative.
This isn't just a matter of what data was given to these so-called journalists before us now. There are many legitimate questions about where Musk got the financing to buy Twitter.
Now, this was a fantastic opportunity for people of opposing ideologies to get together and have a good, productive conversation about the subject matter of the Twitter files. Of course, it quickly descends into personal attacks and vitriol because obviously they can't talk about the ideas at hand because they're so explosively in favor of Matt Taibbi. So they call him a so-called journalist. Well, let me tell you this. Matt Taibbi is not a so-called journalist. Matt Taibbi is the gold standard of journalism. He's one of the most respected journalists in the world for that matter, and he's an honest man and a man of integrity. He's a man who truly believes that the story is the boss, and he will live and die by the sword. Any young journalist should be looking at Matt Taibbi as a shining example of an aspirational figure. Calling him a so-called journalist is like calling Lionel Messi a so-called footballer.
Messi. Oh, brilliant skill from Lionel Messi. Surging forward with real menace here. Brilliant from Messi. Oh, what a goal that is!
And by the way, the Twitter files story was something that catapulted him into public consciousness. But before that, he was also still a very renowned and respected journalist.
Ranking Member Plaskett, I'm not a so-called journalist. I've won the National Magazine Award, the I.F. Stone Award for Independent Journalism, and I've written 10 books, including 4 New York Times bestsellers. I'm now the editor of the online magazine Racket on the independent platform Substack. I'm here today because of a series of events that began late last year when I received a note from a source online. It read, "Are you interested in doing a deep dive into what censorship and manipulation was going on at Twitter?" A week later, the first of what became known as the Twitter files reports came out. To say these attracted intense public interest would be an understatement. My computer looked like a Vegas slot machine, as just the first tweet about the blockage of the Hunter Biden laptop story registered 143 million impressions and 30 million engagements. But it wasn't until a week after the first report, after Michael Schellenberger, Barry Weiss, and other researchers joined the search of the files, that we started to grasp the significance of this story. The original promise of the internet was that it might democratize the exchange of information globally. A free internet would overwhelm all attempts to control information flow, its very existence a threat to anti-democratic forms of government everywhere. What we found in the files was a sweeping effort to reverse that promise and use machine learning and other tools to turn the internet into an instrument of censorship and social control. Unfortunately, our own government appears to be playing a lead role. We learned Twitter, Facebook, Google, and other companies developed a formal system for taking in moderation requests from every corner of government, from the FBI, the DHS, the HHS, DOD, the Global Engagement Center at State, even the CIA. For every government agency scanning Twitter, there were perhaps 20 quasi-private entities doing the same thing.
Stick around, guys, because this one gets juicy. But if you like this content, and if you like watching me stumble my way towards something that resembles truth, then hit that like button, leave me a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and turn on all those notification bells.
If Twitter declined to remove an account right away, government agencies and NGOs would call reporters for the New York Times, Washington Post, and other outlets, who in turn would call Twitter demanding to know why action had not yet been taken. Effectively, news media became an arm of a state-sponsored thought policing system.
I do love Matt Taibbi, but there's a devil on my shoulder that just wishes in this particular scenario, if he was more like a Candace Owens who could just rip straight through the bullshit, that would be so unbelievably entertaining to watch, because these people deserve to be exposed in front of the whole world. But he's a better man than I, so I digress.
When was the first time that Mr. Musk approach you about writing the Twitter files?
Again, Congresswoman, that would...
I just need a date, sir.
But I can't give it to you, unfortunately, because this is a question of sourcing, and I don't give up. I'm a journalist. I don't reveal my sources.
It's a question of chronology.
No, that's a question of sourcing.
Because you earlier said that someone had sent you through the internet some message about whether or not you would be interested in some information.
Yes, and I refer to that person as a source.
So you're not going to tell us when Musk first approached you?
Again, Congresswoman, you're asking me to you're asking a journalist to reveal a source.
So then you consider Mr. Musk to be the direct source of all this?
No, now you're trying to get me to say that he is the source. I just can't answer your question.
Well, he isn't. If you're telling me you can't answer because it's your source, well, then the only logical conclusion is that he is, in fact, your source.
Well, you're free to conclude that.
Well, sir, I just don't understand. You can't have it both ways, but let's move on, because
no, he can. He's a journalist.
No, he can't, because either Musk is the source and he can't talk about it, or Musk is not the source. And if Musk is not the source, then he can discuss
No one
his
has yielded. The gentlelady's out of order. You don't get
and
to
she's
speak
out of
every
order
time.
because
not
he's
recognized. The
interrupted.
gentlelady's not
Mr. Chairman,
recognized.
you're not recognized, Mr. Chairman.
He has not said that.
I don't.
What he has said is he's not going to
Chairman,
reveal his source. And the
I
fact
did
that
not yield
Democrats
my
are
time
pressuring him
the
to do
chairman
so
or
is
the
such a
regulator.
violation
We're
of the
asking
First
him about
Amendment.
his time.
You said that you had free license to look at everything, but yet you yourself posted on your I guess it's kind of like a web page. I don't quite understand what Substack is, but
What a disgusting miscarriage of power this is. Everybody knows that journalists never reveal their sources, especially in high-profile whistleblower cases like this one. And the fact that they're pressuring him to try and reveal his sources and trying to put words in his mouth is just disgusting. And it just goes to show that ethics has just gone out the door these days. And it flies in the face of the First Amendment and of the Shield Law. Now, the Shield Law varies from state to state, but the principle is as follows. It aims to facilitate the news gathering process by excusing journalists from disclosing confidential sources of information and information obtained from the sources. And furthermore, the state of Washington, where this hearing was held, provides journalists with absolute protection for confidential sources.
Journalists should avoid accepting spoon-fed, cherry-picked information if it's likely to be slanted, incomplete, or designed to reach a foregone, easily disputed, or invalid conclusion. Would you agree with that?
I think it depends.
Really? You wouldn't agree that a journalist should avoid spoon-fed, cherry-picked information if it's likely to be slanted, incomplete, or designed to reach a foregone, easily disputed, or invalid conclusion?
Congresswoman, I've done probably a dozen stories involving whistleblowers. Every reported story that I've ever done across 3 decades involves sources who have motives. Every time you do a story, you're making a balancing test between the public interest.
Reclaiming my time. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I ask you this because before you became Elon Musk's hand-picked journalist, and pardon the oxymoron, you stated this on Joe Rogan's podcast about being spoon-fed information, and I quote, "I think that's true of any kind of journalism," and you'll see it behind me here. "I think that's true of any kind of journalism. Once you start getting handed things, then you've lost. They have you at that point, and you got to get out of that habit. You just can't cross that line." Do you still believe what you told Mr. Rogan? Yes or no? Yes or no?
Yes.
Good. Now, you crossed that line with the Twitter files.
No.
Elon Musk, it's my time. Please do not interrupt me. Elon Musk spoon-fed spoon-fed you his cherry-picked information, which you must have suspected promotes a slanted viewpoint or at the very least generates another right-wing conspiracy theory. You violated your own standard, and you appear to have benefited from it. Before the release of the emails in August of last year, you had 661,000 Twitter followers. After the Twitter files, your followers doubled, and now it's 3 times what it was last August. I imagine your Substack readership, which is a subscription, increased significantly because of the work that you did for Elon Musk. Now, I'm not asking you to put a dollar figure on it, but it's quite obvious that you've profited from the Twitter files. You hit the jackpot on that Vegas slot machine to which you referred. That's true, isn't it?
I've also reinvested.
You've made some. No. Is it true that you have profited since you were the recipient of the Twitter files? You've made money. Yes or no?
I think it's probably a wash, honestly.
Nope. You have made money that you did not have before, correct?
But I've also spent money that I didn't have before. I just hired a whole group of people to.
God forbid he gets paid for being one of the world's foremost journalists, right? Well, guess what? That's what happens when you've been mastering your craft for 30 years and you end up breaking one of the biggest stories of our generation. You get paid some. You get to stack up a few dead presidents, a few of those Benjamins. And if that's the case, then so he should. You could see by Matt Taibbi's face that the quote she brought up from his conversation with Joe Rogan was so grossly taken out of context that it's not even funny. And I watched that podcast. And what he was talking about there was mainstream journalists and news anchors who basically just get handed a script and told what to say. That has absolutely nothing to do with a whistleblower case where he gets given information and creates the story from it. Those two forms of journalism are worlds apart. On one hand, you have a brave, independent journalist who is doing a groundbreaking story, and on the other hand, you have a talking head for a propagandist network that basically just does what they're told. Very different things. But it doesn't matter to these cretins. All that matters to them is to be able to twist and bend reality and to be able to lie to suit the agenda. But that's what happens when you've got no soul. That'll be it from me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to get at me on social media or join the Rattlesnake TV community on Locals, then hit that link pinned in the top of the comments. And if you want to watch another video, then click here. And if you want to subscribe to the channel, if you haven't already, then click here. Until next time, I'm Jake. This is Rattlesnake TV, keeping you armed and dangerous.